What's going on, folks, and welcome back to the world of Eternum. Today we got ourselves an insanely huge patch, but I'm only going to be breaking down everything but the balance changes. That's just way too much for me to handle right now. So let's talk about the nitty gritty. First thing, the zone of Ebonscale Reach has officially been added to New World. This is a fertile territory named for the black fungus that grows in abundance there. It's located north of Monarch's Bluff and west of Brightwood on the map, intended for players level 51 and above, and features our recently introduced Empress Zhou along with several new hostile lifeforms as well as plenty of points of interest. Also, I do know it's pronounced Joe, but I just can't feel comfortable calling her that, so I have to go with Zhou. Some of the new lifeforms coming with this zone are the Empress Dynasty warriors we learned about, like the Corrupted Musketeers, Heavies, warriors, spear captains, summoners, evil maidens, and even tigers and corrupted tigers, along with other animals we saw during the development update. Also notice that some of the Dynasty Corrupted have new types of weapons. We can see a two-handed mace in one of them, another long-bladed curved polearm in another, and even a staff that looks more like a melee-based one than a magic. But that could just be a corrupted magic staff as well. With this update, we also have ourselves a new expedition known as the Garden of Genesis. Story behind it is that it leads to the birthplace of the Angry Earth. Players must face elemental protectors in order to penetrate this nursery's primordial heart. This area, like the rest of Eden Grove, has also been infected with the mysterious blight. And one of the things I'm interested in is learning more about what the relationship between the Angry Earth and the Ancients was. From what we've learned so far about the blight in previous lore videos, this might end up answering a lot of questions about what was on the Shattered Mountain before the corruption. Now, before we can enter this expedition, there will be a prerequisite quest needed from Survivalist Elwood in Eden Grove and Ranger Herath in Shattered Mountain. So 100% this is more than likely an expedition for endgame players, which is good because the endgame did need more added to it for holding players over. Although I'm still advocating for open world features like dynamic events, incursions, or real open world bosses, but I doubt we'll see anything like that for a long time. Also, because one of the bosses in this expedition is named Caretaker and another one named Greenskeeper, I wonder what will actually be waiting for us at the center of this expedition. They've also fully introduced the Outpost Rush Battleground, which is the 20v20 PvP mode that we talked about. I was hoping this would be something we could enter as early as level 25 to be honest, because this game could really use some love in the mid game as well. But if they're planning to do other modes in the future, which I really hope they are, that would be the perfect opportunity to squeeze it in there, so players that enjoy PvP can have a good time the whole way through. Next thing is that they've added main story quests going all the way up to level 40. Previously they stopped at about 20 to 25 after you got your corrupted staff, so this might feature a lot more story related information, and also a good amount of experience before you have to use other leveling methods. Voiceovers have apparently been added too for the starting quest lines in the starting areas, which I'm pretty surprised about because under the circumstances that we've been in since last year, I figured it would have been more difficult but not impossible to pull something like that off. Either way, it's a good thing to see. Apparently this next change is related to armor quests. So my guess is that this is a quest line at level 60, along with those other required levels, that leads up to getting legendary armor or at the very least epic quality armor. Previously, we only had legendary weapon quests at level 60, and legendary armor quest lines was something that was highly sought after as far as I remember. This also seems to introduce actual set bonuses for this armor set in particular. My opinion on any of this doesn't really matter to begin with, but I'm not sure how I feel about set bonuses being implemented if this is something they plan to expand on. I guess we'll have to see for sure, but I only hope that it ends up being balanced. Weapon quest lines besides the legendaries are also now a thing, and you can find them at different mid-game zones located throughout the map. For the progression side of things, they've started by decreasing the required experience to level from level 8 to 60 by 10%, but they've also reduced the experience from PvP faction missions by 5% to 18%, which sounds like they did a separate nerf to them because back in the December update they had already nerfed the PvP faction missions by 10%. Now in my opinion, I didn't really like the fact that mob grinding and corrupted breaches were nerfed and are continuing to be nerfed, although not as much in this specific patch. I didn't even do the Scorpius tower farming during the preview, but about the only zone that I can tolerate doing faction missions for the majority of the time, besides of course the starting regions, is Morningdale. One of the main reasons why I stacked up over 1100 to 1200 hours in Alpha 2 was because I spent so much time mob grinding. And with the stagger removal and all these other changes, I'm not sure, but I do hope I'll be able to recreate that experience. So the next section deals with the loot side of things. Starting off with weapons are now more likely to drop with attributes that are more directly relevant to the weapon. which is a good thing because the last thing anybody wants is a warhammer with 30 dexterity on it or a hatchet with 15 intelligence, unless you're a battle mage. There's also an increased chance for items to drop with the gem slot, which it's important to remember that gems now give elemental and perk bonuses instead of how it worked before. Because of this, we might also see an increase to natural rare and epic drops at the tiers they're available. Additional named items will also be dropping in expeditions, but it's important to note that these expeditions aren't really going to replace crafting. Like they stated previously in this update, gear obtained through the quest lines and probably expeditions are not in contention for best in slot, so crafters will still be very crucial to in-game progression. Along with some other minor changes affecting the drops, all equipable items are now either bind on equip or bind on pickup. Now they say that this is an important step to protect the economy and keep demand for quality items high, but depending on how this works, this could end up fairly controversial, because it's really good that we can still trade crafted items and whatnot, but sometimes players can get frustrated if they can't trade amongst themselves if they just killed a field boss like Zinc the Obstructor for instance. Even though in this case it would be drop trading instead, but we'll see how it works before giving more feedback on that. Because the biggest question is it the right solution? They also updated some of the looks of the armor pieces that drop from ancient enemies in the world, which is great because I was just about to mention with those armor quests that if we really do have legendary quest lines or even epic, I really hope those armor pieces have their own design. You can never go wrong with having more variety with that kind of stuff. But moving on, for the crafting changes, they've started by adjusting the drop rates for rare resources. If you don't remember, during the crafting update in January, they made a hell of a lot of changes to the system and what we can do with materials. And they've also updated the way luck bonuses work. So now the drop rates are less rare and more heavily impacted by luck bonuses from food and armor. During the preview, we talked about how having luck bonuses might help you when it comes to opening corrupted caches, and unless that's changed, this change might definitely be one to keep in mind. There's also a bunch of minor changes here, like the adjusted crafting requirements of named items, adjusted refining requirements for precious materials like silver, gold, and platinum, new set of crafting modifiers that enable us to apply a specific attribute role to an item when crafting, and a few more. Coming down to a big one for me, we cannot salvage elemental essence down to a lower tier anymore. Instead, a skilled arcanist can upgrade them to higher tiers. So this is where map knowledge will come in very handy, because now you can't just go to places like Merkgard and Chest Farm and then salvage all that stuff down for crafting potions and corrupted tinctures. Also, only one tier of the elemental essence can be acquired from the world. All other ones must be upgraded. That's cool for making Arcanists way more viable, but I'll be honest, that's going to be very annoying for trying to keep up on pots while leveling at the same time, besides buying it from the faction vendors. I'm extremely against falling prey to the meta and taking a life staff wherever I go, so I'll have to figure something out when it comes to this part. But skipping down a few changes that affect the ingredients parts of the crafting system, they've added a material converter to the faction shop. We can use these to alchemically convert refining reagents. So like sandpaper can be converted to another with a small loss of efficiency. This may seem small, but it's actually very important for crafters. When you go into a specific craft like armor crafting for instance, if you're strictly working with leather and cloth, then you're going to have a huge stockpile of a resource like sandpaper. So this will put some relief on people having to try and sell their excess or either buy or gather what they need to continue refining. Then they have some small changes that affect the fishing, starting with them polishing the quest objectives and improving the rewards. This also included new fishing armor with perks and special fishing poles, with fishing missions being added to territory projects, which that's good for people that plan to go into that profession, and that'll give you some motivation to keep leveling it up. On the tail end of this, we come to the UX and UI changes. They've started off with implementing some improvements to the inventory screen. First thing is we have a new full character view for players to inspect, which looks very cinematic from the screenshots so far. And then we've got ourselves a new dynamic layout that keeps our inventory closer to our equipment for more convenient dragging and dropping. While we're on the subject, I really do hope that they increase the cap of Azoth at some point to about 4,000 or 5,000, or even 2,000 at the very least, because it can be pretty easy to cap it out if you're farming it. And that would be a way to prevent excess wasting going on. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is the combat changes. With this patch, they've begun to tune and refine their existing AI combat experience. In this release, they've updated another large batch of AI enemies. Now the next thing, okay, potions have a cooldown timer now, unless I'm misunderstanding this. Health potions, health regen potions, mana potions, they all have a cooldown of some kind. Flat out, I'm not 100% I like this yet. Let me tell you why. During the Reekwater event, when they changed the attribute scaling, I was starting to feel very worried that Constitution builds would not be as effective as they used to be. Something that worried me even more so was the fact that they removed the stagger. This essentially meant to me that our characters are probably going to be taking a lot more hits. So if we put a cooldown on health potions and these tweaks to the attributes they're doing are not good enough to compensate the damage, then my theory is that even with 2 weapon slots, this might force people to be even more persuaded to use the life staff as a backup constantly, or be extremely careful for fighting more than 1 or 2 enemies at a time, unless they have a designated healer with them most of the time. I hope that's not the case and that I'm wrong, and that this will work in the end, but we'll have to see to know for sure. But after that, they did talk about the default block angle being changed to 180 degrees instead of 90. Very curious to see how this affects PvP, but it probably won't be that big of an issue. Along with updating the melee functionality for more consistent hits, they've also done an attribute rework. So related to what we've said before, they've increased the damage scaling per attribute points invested, which is good because dex builds were okay for the most part, but strength builds were always super lacking from what we've seen in previous iterations. Constitution is being tuned so that the percentage of health increase is tied to the damage increase. This is the part I'm hoping helps us in PvE situations too, especially for those of us that like to run tank builds but don't want to use the life staff. Single attribute builds will still offer max weapon damage, but they've adjusted dual attribute scaling to make them more competitive and more build flexible. And right here we can see the baseline for whatever option we choose. Next thing they've done is added some armor changes. Both physical and elemental armor ratings now scale more consistently across armor classes. This means that heavy armor now has the highest rating for both physical and elemental damage, which is very surprising, and light armor has the lowest. Yeah, this one in specific will be very interesting. So now I guess we will actually feel like real tanks, but now mages are going to have a harder time against us in territory wars and won't be able to smack you for half your health with one incinerate or a smite from a life staff. And also in the PvE aspect, this will make things easier because there are a good chunk of magic type mobs that we have to deal with at endgame. But also now each armor class has 3 different types of armor distribution. So the way I'm understanding this is that medium armor might have a physical one, more physical protection, less elemental, and then they'll have a balanced and elemental version of that too. And then heavy and light armor will have the same, but heavy armor will have higher values for physical and elemental protection than the others. That's an interesting way of doing it, and I suppose when I think about it, light armor having the least rating in both departments does make more sense because of the trade-off that you can dodge roll. And dodge rolling can be extremely good if you know how to use it in not just PvE, but PvP especially. Next thing is the armor that shields provide has been reduced by a lot. New damage mitigations for them will be the following: 1.35% for round shields, 2.6% for kite shields, and 5.2% for towers. The mitigation bonuses will also scale down with higher base armor ratings. With light armor, these mitigation numbers would be reduced slightly, and with heavy armor, they'd be cut by about 50%. Shield weights have also been standardized across tiers. Because shields affect the equipment load, it was frustrating that higher tier ones of the same type could cause a player to go over their equipment load, and that's been solved with this update. The last thing we'll talk about for now is the changes to their equipment load system. They want each equipment load to have a unique role in strength. Both light and medium armor now get a damage bonus, 20% for light, 10% for medium. Good change on that side because that's an even further incentive to compensate for lower armor values. Medium and heavy now get a duration bonus for about 10% for medium and 20% for heavy. And it looks like they're making some major changes to grit. They're removing that alongside accuracy, damage resistance, and stamina modifiers from all equipment load bonuses. On top of that, they reduced the block stability for equipment loads from 35% to 25%, removed the penalty from light armor, made changes to the stamina cost for light and heavy equipment loads, and reduced the medium equipment load threshold from 17.5 to 15, and heavy equipment load from 32.5 to 30. So obviously there's a crap ton of changes here that are better looked at under a microscope, and I don't want to get too far into these balance changes because the next part where they remove grit from a ton of different abilities tells me that I need to look over this entire thing a few times before I even jump into this discussion and get a clearer picture of how this all might work in game. I've talked your ears off enough at this point, so let's go ahead and end it there. I'll come back to the balance changes in a couple of days. Till then, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this ridiculously large set of patch notes, and have a wonderful night or day. Farewell.